Hi, my name's Kevin Martin. I'm here with Jennifer Phillips Russo for our somewhat weekly. I know we've fallen a little bit behind recently, partially related to COVID, but somewhat weekly podcast update. We're going to get back on track this week. We've got some information about a frost that occurred a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to take a few minutes to share it with you today. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer and have her share some of her results.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome. Podcast Wednesday, we're back. So yes, last week was a lot of really just getting out and assessing some of the damage. So sorry we weren't here for you last week, but here we are. This picture behind me on my background is actually from yesterday. So we're definitely a go on the season, and this area did not get hit. There were definitely some vineyards around the region that were severely damaged, but I have had reports from growers as they've gotten out after this beautiful weather we've had where things have pushed, and it's just not as serious as they had hoped it was. There are some, don't get me wrong, that are definitely severely damaged, 80–90% damaged. They are now pushing their secondaries over there. So I've talked to some of the industry representatives just to see, get a feel of what they're thinking. Excuse me. And they believe that we're going to be, now this was before they went out all last week and did the exact going out and counts, but they had said that it looks about a 20% crop loss for the season. So we'll see if that actually comes true. You're going to have to get out and do some cluster counts in a couple actually days. Look what's going on out there now.
Yeah, and Jennifer, before you started in your position, we did a fairly robust map last time we had freeze damage based on NOAA weather station data. This frost in some ways looks a little more typical. It's not as dramatic as that frost was. And the weather station data isn't nearly as good because the frost itself was so spotty. Like all our NOAA stations didn't indicate that there was going to be a lot of damage. And you go to all of those NOAA station sites and there really isn't a lot of damage. So I guess what I would say is, so we're thinking maybe 20% damage is the number. It does seem to be very spotty in terms of it hitting pockets. There's probably an inversion. So assessment is just going to be very difficult.
Yeah. And when I was talking to the industry representatives, they had said we are nowhere near the 2012 damage that was out there. However, we are worse than the 2016 damage that has happened. So if you happen to be one of those farmers who have blocks that are damaged, what can you do about it? Right. So I know a lot of people are, can I cut back on my sprays and my applications? And I would say, yes, you could cut back on your nitrogen application if you have severe damage and severe loss. Let's focus on building vine size. In order to do so, do not skimp on the very important pre-bloom and post-bloom sprays. Don't skip on those. You can, if you don't have fruit coming on, dial back on your, assess it as it goes along, see if you still need sprays. However, if your leaves start getting a little yucky, you want to get out there and get a spray on because that's how the plant makes its food. So let them have some clean leaves to build a nice root base and get healthy.
Yes. Yeah. I think, I agree with that. The one thing I would say is as difficult as it is for us as extension or a processor to do an industry-wide assessment, it will also be difficult for a grower to do that. 2012 was great in the sense that you could drive by in a pickup truck and figure out that you didn't need to spray that block because there were not 10-inch shoots yet. You were waiting for secondaries and there were no primaries. And not to say that, unfortunately, that doesn't exist for some growers this year, but they're really few and far between in terms of the number of growers that did get hit at least a little bit that are going to have difficulty assessing. And the growers that don't have difficulty assessing because they had so much damage, there just aren't nearly as many as them. So before you do change your nitrogen application, make sure that the damage is assessed accurately.
Exactly. And get out there and look. There are some, like at reports, that when they initially called me, it was doom and gloom. And then the next week they called and they're like, well, we're not as bad as we thought. So make sure you actually get out there and walk your vineyards. It's going to be very important this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think two things to keep in mind is it looks ugly at first. And we've had back-to-back years for a lot of growers of crop estimates in July that are 10, 15, 20 tons per acre. So if you lost 20% of your crop and you're aiming for 15 tons per acre and all you're doing is thinning all the time, you're in a pretty good spot. If you're still pruning down to 100 buds and you're having issues with vine size and they're not particularly fruitful and you lost 20% of your crop, you might get to a point where you can tone down on the nitrogen. So it really does depend on your assessment for what you think your crop potential is now.
Also, if you did lose a whole bunch of your crop, Mr. Martin, what do we hope that they have that they can apply for this year? Everybody says, is this where Kevin talks about?
Yeah, so on average, they don't have anything, because if we lost 20% of our crop, you shouldn't be having you shouldn't have crop insurance coverage above 75%. But we know, of course, that frost is not average and it'll hit pockets. It should be a very good risk management tool for growers that are able to carry higher levels of coverage. In that 75% area is probably what you're going to need this year. There are going to be some growers who don't need quite that much to collect. But you will certainly need something above CAT, and you'll need to make sure that your blocks are divided. So where growers have divided blocks and they insure different blocks on their own yield, there are definitely going to be some claims out there that will probably be significant. And for some growers, it'll be the first time in a long time. It looks like it will be interesting to see if area yields trigger a collection. A few growers do have insurance on area yields, so they get more money if there is an industry-wide event. And by industry, we mean county-wide event. So because we've strung together so many good years, the expected area yield in Erie County, Pennsylvania, for example, is 7.3 tons per acre, which is up from 6. So that extra 1.3 tons is a really significant amount in terms of trying to create a claim. Very few growers are insured for that supplemental coverage, but the ones that are, it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because that's existed for 5 years now and we've never seen a claim. We've never had a disaster. And we actually, in the last 5 years, we haven't had any significant disasters, so you wouldn't expect to receive a claim. 2016 was extremely minor. So we don't know how that insurance works yet, practically speaking. We know theoretically, how they wrote up the regulations and what they said it's going to do. So we'll see. But yes, unfortunately, in terms of risk management on the business side of things, there's lots of stuff you can do, and it was already time to do all of that. So obviously you can't get crop insurance now for this year. It does, always spur a discussion about what maybe you should do going forward, but it's not going to help you out right now. And we've seen declining participation in crop insurance. It's gotten very expensive for some very good reasons. Basically, we haven't had a lot of claims, and the price of grapes, the insured value, is holding fairly steady. It's over $260 a ton. It should continue to drop. It's based on long-term averages, and yields are just through the roof because, like I said, we haven't had any claims recently. So you look at your average yield that you're insured for and a higher price, and it results in a higher premium. But the good news is, if you had an event this year, it'll be much easier to collect, because a lot of growers are saying, yeah, it's going to be a good year for me. I'm going to get 6 tons per acre or 7, and I might still get an insurance check. So that's what's different now. And that's why crop insurance is expensive right now. And for some growers, it means they'll get a claim.
Yes. So to recap, it did happen. Not everybody got hit. If it did happen to you, take this year to focus on your vine size and really build that base for next year. So only if you have severe damage can you dial back on your nitrogen. I wouldn't stop it altogether. I would just dial back on it. Keep up with the potash and the lime. Keep spraying at least those initial important sprays to keep your vines clean, and then just watch for the rest of the season to see if you need to add some. Just in the damaged areas. Keep doing what you're doing in all your other areas.
And that's what's going to be a challenge, is a lot of these activities we're discussing in terms of saving money, like late season powdery sprays and nitrogen applications, they're all on the chopping block. But, if you have a 40-acre block and 4 acres in the middle of it is a low spot that's damaged, you're probably just going to treat it the same way, and the same way should be to take care of it, because you've got 36 good acres. But again, everybody's path is going to be different because it was, it was a frost event. It was variable. So, take a look at your own vineyards and figure it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that said, I hope you guys will join us a little bit later for our coffee pot meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll be back next week. We've got a couple more updates that we'll get rolling on. So we're not going to skip a week again for a while, I don't think. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. We've got our cell phones ready and email. We're still not in the office. We look forward to getting back at some point, but we are certainly available to answer any and all of your questions. And if you have a suggestion for a podcast topic, we'd be happy to take it. Thank you.
Have a great week.